Those weren't just angry words thrown in the heat of argument. They were a promise she's been keeping for the past 2 months. I should have seen the warning signs much earlier. The relationship started like most do, exciting, passionate, seemingly perfect. She was beautiful, intelligent, and seemed to understand me in ways no one else did. But underneath that carefully crafted exterior lurked something dangerous. I just refused to acknowledge it. The first red flag appeared 6 months in, when I canceled our dinner plans to help a friend move. What should have been a minor disappointment turned into a 3-day silent treatment, followed by finding my friend's social media accounts flooded with anonymous messages suggesting he was a backstabber. I confronted her, and she denied everything with tears in her eyes that seemed so genuine I questioned my own judgment. Then came the coincidences, running into her at places I never mentioned going to, her knowing details about conversations I had had when she wasn't present, the strange way my phone would sometimes light up at night when I wasn't touching it. The breaking point came when my sister called, concerned about emails she had received from my account, emails I never sent, canceling my visit home for the holidays. When I checked my sent folder, there they were, perfectly written in my typical style. That night I changed all my passwords and watched as she unlocked my phone while thinking I was asleep. I confronted her the next morning. "I know what you've been doing," I said calmly, packing my essential belongings. She transformed before my eyes. The mask slipped, revealing what had been hiding beneath the surface all along. "You think you can just leave after everything I've done for you?" she hissed, blocking the doorway. "Nobody will ever know you like I do. Nobody will ever care enough to keep track of you like I do." "That's not love," I replied, moving past her. "That's control." Her face contorted with rage, then suddenly smoothed into an eerie calm that was far more unsettling than her anger. "You'll regret leaving me," she said with absolute certainty. "I'll make sure of it." I left that day and moved into a new apartment across town. For a week, everything seemed normal. The relief of escaping that toxic relationship gave me new energy. I started reconnecting with friends I had gradually lost touch with during our relationship. I didn't realize how isolated I had become until I was free again. Then the first text came from an unknown number. "Blue looks good on you today." I was wearing a blue shirt. I was sitting in a coffee shop clear across town from where she lived. I looked around but didn't see her. The second message came an hour later. "You shouldn't trust him, you know. He talks about you when you're not around." I was having lunch with my colleague. We had just been discussing a potential promotion I was up for. The messages continued, becoming more frequent, more detailed. Sometimes they would reference conversations I had had in private places. Sometimes they would include information only someone with access to my personal accounts would know. I changed my phone number. The text stopped, but then came the small signs around my apartment. Things slightly out of place, the scent of her perfume on a pillow I knew I hadn't used. The strange feeling of being watched as I tried to sleep. Yesterday, I found a hidden camera in my bathroom light fixture. That's when I knew her promise wasn't idle. The silent treatment I had been giving her, blocking her accounts, refusing to respond to the harassment, wasn't working. She wasn't just watching from afar. She was intimately inserting herself into every aspect of my life while I tried to pretend she wasn't there. Tonight, as I double-checked the locks for the 5th time, I realized that my silence isn't discouraging her. It's encouraging her. In her twisted mind, this is still a relationship. My silence is just part of a game we're playing. But I'm done playing games. I'm done being a passive observer in my own life. Tomorrow, I break my silence. Tomorrow, the hunter becomes the hunted. 2 weeks after our breakup, the real psychological warfare began. The morning started with a call from my boss asking why I had emailed requesting a week off for a mental health crisis. I hadn't sent any such email. When I checked my sent folder, there it was, perfectly worded in my writing style, sent at 3 o'clock in the morning while I was asleep. The IT department confirmed someone had accessed my account remotely. They reset everything, added 2-factor authentication, and suggested I check all my devices for keyloggers. That evening, I found one, professionally installed and nearly undetectable, on my laptop. The next day, 3 friends called asking if I was okay. They had received concerning messages from my social media accounts about my unstable mental state and increasing paranoia. One even received a detailed message about how I was fabricating stories about an ex-girlfriend stalking me to cover up my own deteriorating condition. She was trying to isolate me again, more effectively this time, by making me appear unstable to anyone who might help me. She was crafting a narrative where I was the unhinged one, not her. I was in the grocery store when I felt someone watching me. Looking up, I caught a glimpse of her turning down another aisle. I abandoned my cart and headed straight for the exit, only to see her car parked 3 spaces down from mine. The same pattern repeated at the gym, the bank, even at a restaurant 20 miles from my apartment, where I had gone specifically to avoid familiar places. The most unsettling incident came when I returned home to find all my framed photos turned face down. Nothing else was disturbed. No break-in signs, no locks tampered with, just every single photograph methodically turned over, including ones inside my dresser drawers. The message was clear. There was nowhere private, nowhere safe. I installed a security system the next day. Cameras, motion sensors, the works. The technician found 2 more hidden cameras already present in my apartment, one aimed at my bed, another at my desk. The police took a report but said without evidence of her installing them, they couldn't do much. That night, while reviewing my new security footage, I noticed something strange, a shadow moving across my living room window. I replayed it at higher resolution. There she was, standing across the street, staring directly at my apartment, not hiding, not trying to conceal herself, just watching for 3 hours straight. When I showed the footage to the police, they agreed to speak with her. She had a flawless response. She was visiting a friend in my building and got lost. She acted concerned when they mentioned my accusations, suggesting gently that perhaps I wasn't coping well with our breakup. The officers left with sympathetic looks thrown my way, not for being stalked, but for being that guy who couldn't move on. The digital attacks escalated. My professional contacts received emails with altered versions of my work containing errors that made me look incompetent. My bank called about unusual transfer attempts. Food deliveries I never ordered started arriving at all hours. Credit card applications were submitted in my name. I changed my email, my phone number again, even moved to a short-term rental under a friend's name. For 4 blessed days there was silence. I started sleeping through the night again. Then a package arrived at the new address, a box containing printed screenshots of every conversation I had had online in the past week. On top was a note, "Distance doesn't matter when you're always with me." She had somehow compromised my devices at a deeper level than I had anticipated. My digital life was an open book to her. The invasion felt more intimate than any physical break-in could have been. When I landed a promising job interview after weeks of searching, I arrived to find they had rescheduled based on an email I never sent. The receptionist showed me the message, which included personal details explaining why I was no longer interested in the position. That afternoon, I received a text from an unknown number. Opportunities come and go, but I'm always here. Attached was a photo of me leaving the interview building, taken just minutes earlier. I realized then that her warning wasn't just about making me regret leaving her through harassment. It was about demonstrating complete control over my life, showing that no matter what I did, where I went, who I talked to, she would be there, watching and interfering. Her message became clear. If she couldn't be part of my life by choice, she would force her way in. My silence wasn't discouraging her. It was challenging her to try harder, to prove how deeply she could embed herself in my existence despite my rejection. This wasn't just stalking, this was a comprehensive campaign to dismantle my life and rebuild it with her at the center. And with each passing day of my continued silence, she was getting better at it. 1 month into this nightmare, I decided conventional solutions weren't working. The police considered it a he said, she said situation, despite the mounting evidence. My family began questioning if I was becoming paranoid. Even my closest friends started keeping their distance after receiving confidential messages about my mental state, messages that could only have come from someone with intimate knowledge of our private conversations. I needed to regain control, and that meant understanding exactly how she was tracking me. I purchased a new laptop, phone, and tablet, paying cash at 3 different stores in a neighboring city. I left my compromised devices at home, still powered on and connected to Wi-Fi, creating digital breadcrumbs that would show normal activity patterns. With these clean devices, I documented everything. Screenshots of messages, recorded phone calls from concerned friends relaying information she had shared, detailed logs of each incident with timestamps. I created a secure cloud storage account with military-grade encryption to back everything up, something she wouldn't expect from someone she considered technologically naive. I hired a private investigator with experience in stalking cases. The PI found something disturbing within hours, a tracking device magnetically attached under my car's rear bumper. Professional grade, with battery life measured in months, not days. This wasn't amateur hour. She had invested serious money in monitoring me. The PI also discovered she had befriended my elderly neighbor under false pretenses, claiming to be my cousin concerned about my recent behavior. The neighbor had unwittingly given her access to the building multiple times and kept her informed about my comings and goings. But the most chilling discovery came when the PI ran specialized scanning equipment through my apartment and detected signals coming from nearly every electronic device I owned. Not just my computer and phone, but my smart TV, wireless speakers, even my refrigerator had been compromised. She had effectively turned my entire apartment into a surveillance system. The extent of her technical capabilities shocked me. This wasn't just obsession. This was calculated, methodical invasion requiring significant resources and expertise. Either she had skills I never knew about, or she had hired professionals. Neither option was comforting. I decided on a counterintelligence approach. Instead of running or hiding, I would feed her false information while gathering evidence. I began having loud phone conversations about plans that didn't exist, sending emails about meetings that would never happen, discussing fake job prospects within earshot of my compromised devices. Sure enough, she appeared at the coffee shop where I had loudly planned to meet a non-existent friend. I had positioned myself with clear sightlines to all entrances and was ready when she arrived. I discreetly photographed her entering the establishment, checking her watch and scanning for me. When she realized I wasn't there, the mask slipped, her expression transforming from casual anticipation to cold, calculated anger before she regained control. I continued this strategy for a week, leading her to empty appointments while documenting each appearance. The pattern became clear. She would always arrive 15 to 20 minutes early, survey the location, and position herself with optimal viewing angles. This wasn't impulsive behavior. This was tactical. When I felt I had enough evidence, I filed for a restraining order. The judge reviewed my documentation, the PI's findings, and the photographs. He seemed sympathetic but ultimately unconvinced that the level of threat warranted legal intervention. Her lawyer painted me as obsessive, suggesting I was manufacturing evidence due to inability to accept the breakup. The restraining order was denied. The system had failed me. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. The system works for those who understand it, not those who expect it to save them. Attached was a screenshot of my denied restraining order, information that shouldn't have been publicly available yet. I realized I had been approaching this all wrong. The legal system, the police, traditional security measures, these were all playing fields where she held advantages through preparation, resources, and manipulation. I couldn't beat her at a game she had been methodically planning while I was still catching up. What truly terrified me wasn't just her surveillance, but how effectively she was manipulating everyone around me, friends, colleagues, neighbors. She was systematically turning my support network against me through carefully crafted narratives that contained just enough truth to seem plausible. My continued silence was my greatest weakness. By refusing to engage, I had ceded control of the narrative entirely to her. She was writing my story for everyone else, unchallenged, while I retreated further into isolation. The next morning, I discovered my professional reputation under attack. Colleagues received emails containing altered versions of my work with critical errors highlighted. Clients were contacted about concerns regarding my reliability. Employment verification calls were made to my company from fake recruiters, seeding doubts about my stability. This wasn't just about making me uncomfortable. This was about systematically dismantling every aspect of my life until I had nowhere to turn except back to her. The psychological architecture of her plan became crystal clear, and with it, my path forward. Fighting directly against her wasn't working. Hiding wasn't working. Silence definitely wasn't working. I needed a different approach altogether, one she wouldn't expect from someone she thought she knew intimately. I turned off the lights that night, sat in the darkness of my compromised apartment, and began planning, not a retreat, not a confrontation, but something entirely different. I would use her obsession against her. I would transform from prey to predator. She wanted my attention. She was about to get it, just not in the way she expected. 6 weeks after our breakup, I initiated my counteroffensive. Instead of running from her surveillance, I would use it. My first step was creating a consistent pattern she could track. Morning coffee at the same cafe, lunch at predictable locations, evening routines timed to the minute. I wanted her to become comfortable with my predictability. Meanwhile, I assembled a team of allies who believed me, my cousin, who had witnessed her behavior firsthand during our relationship, a college friend with cybersecurity expertise, and, surprisingly, my boss, who had finally seen through her manipulations when she overplayed her hand with increasingly erratic messages supposedly from me. My cybersecurity friend set up a clean digital infrastructure for communication between us, burner phones, encrypted messaging apps, and protocols that kept our plans completely offline. We operated under the assumption that everything else was compromised. I maintained my predictable routines publicly while my team executed the first phase of our plan. We identified all her surveillance methods, the spyware on my devices, the physical trackers, the social engineering with my neighbors. Rather than removing them, we prepared to feed them all simultaneously with the same false narrative. The opportunity came when a genuine job offer arrived from a competitor firm. Instead of responding normally, I had a loud phone conversation in my apartment about how excited I was for the interview, mentioning the time, location, and my intention to accept immediately if offered the position. On the morning of the interview, I followed my usual routine, dressed in my best suit, and headed to the cafe where I always had breakfast. As expected, she was there, pretending to read a book while watching me. I made sure she saw me checking the address for the interview and reviewing my notes. What she didn't know was that there was no interview at that address. The building existed, but the company didn't have an office there. Instead, my boss was waiting at a conference room we had booked, along with the company's legal counsel and HR director. They had finally seen enough evidence of her interference with my work to take corporate action. I arrived at the false interview location, knowing she would follow. I entered the building confidently, rode the elevator to the specified floor, and walked down a hallway that led to a dead end. There, as expected, was a maintenance door that opened to a service stairwell, just as my team had scouted the day before. I slipped through, descended 2 floors, and exited through a service entrance where my cousin waited in a car we had borrowed that morning, a vehicle she had never seen and couldn't have tracked. By the time she realized I had vanished from the building that had no exits on that floor, according to the directory, I was already arriving at my actual destination, my workplace, where the meeting with legal was already in progress. The company's lawyers had assembled a comprehensive case documenting how she had impersonated me in company communications, attempted to sabotage client relationships, and interfered with business operations. They were preparing to file for a corporate restraining order, a legal tool with significantly more weight than my personal attempt had carried. While this meeting progressed, my cybersecurity friend executed the second phase of our plan. Using access to my compromised devices, he activated a program that simultaneously sent messages to everyone in my contact list, not from my regular accounts, but from a new email address created specifically for this purpose. The message was simple. For the past 6 weeks, someone has been impersonating me, accessing my accounts, and spreading false information about my mental health and professional conduct. I have been gathering evidence and working with legal experts. If you've received concerning messages that seem to be from me, they weren't. Please forward any suspicious communications to this secure address. I apologize for my silence until now. It was necessary while building this case. Attached was a carefully curated selection of evidence, enough to prove the situation without revealing our full strategy. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of friends and colleagues replied with screenshots of messages I hadn't sent, creating a comprehensive map of her manipulation network. By that evening, she realized something had changed. My carefully cultivated, predictable patterns were disrupted. Her carefully constructed narrative was unraveling as my support network reconnected with the truth. The corporate legal team had delivered their cease and desist letter to her home address, an address I had never provided to my workplace. That night, my phone lit up with a message from another unknown number. "You think you're clever? You think you can turn this around? This isn't a game you can win." I responded for the first time in 6 weeks, "You're right. This isn't a game." I could almost feel her satisfaction through the screen. Finally, engagement, acknowledgement, response. Exactly what she had been trying to provoke for weeks. But what she didn't understand was that this wasn't the beginning of communication. This was the announcement of my counterattack. I knew she would escalate. People like her always do when challenged, and that escalation would be her undoing. Every system she had established to track me was now being monitored. Every account she had hacked was now a honeypot. Every move she made would generate evidence that even the most skeptical authority couldn't ignore. The silence she had monitored so obsessively was broken. But in its place wasn't the fearful, desperate response she wanted. It was the calm, calculated strategy of someone who had used those 2 months to study their opponent and prepare for total victory. She wanted a reaction. She was about to get one, just not the one she had anticipated. 7 weeks after our breakup, I knew the endgame was approaching. My brief response to her message had produced exactly the reaction I anticipated, a flurry of escalating activity. Digital attacks increased tenfold. Physical surveillance became almost careless in its intensity. She was burning through her calculated restraint, growing desperate to regain control of our twisted dynamic. My cybersecurity friend monitored the honeypot accounts we had set up, tracking her every digital move. We documented attempts to access my banking information, contact my extended family members, and even reach out to former relationships from years before I met her. The scope of her research into my past was chilling. She had built dossiers on people I barely remembered. The corporate legal action had restricted her ability to interfere with my professional life, but it only redirected her focus to my personal connections. Friends reported strange encounters with her, casual meetings that seemed coincidental until she began dropping intimate details about their lives she shouldn't have known. Several received warnings about me that grew increasingly desperate and less believable. I maintained radio silence after that single response, knowing it would frustrate her more than any ongoing engagement. Every attempt she made to provoke a reaction was met with nothing. Meanwhile, my team and I continued gathering evidence and building our case. The decisive moment came when she crossed a line I had deliberately left exposed. Throughout this ordeal, I had protected most of my personal life but left one vulnerability visible: my weekly visits to a coffee shop where I would work on my laptop for exactly 3 hours. These visits were genuine. I needed some semblance of normalcy amid the chaos. As predicted, she couldn't resist the opportunity. My cybersecurity friend detected an attempt to breach my coffee shop Wi-Fi connection, an unsophisticated attack compared to her usual methods, suggesting growing desperation. We traced it to her device in real time while I continued working, seemingly oblivious. What she didn't know was that my laptop contained nothing of value. It was a prop loaded with a custom operating system that recorded every intrusion attempt while feeding her falsified personal information, fabricated emails, fake journal entries, manufactured calendar events. Among these plants was an invitation to a gathering at a local restaurant the following evening, a celebration dinner for my supposed acceptance of that job offer I had used as bait weeks earlier. The details were specific: private dining room, 8 o'clock in the evening, business casual attire, a list of attendees including names she would recognize from monitoring my communications. That evening, I sat in my apartment watching her through the security system we had installed in secret locations around my building. Right on schedule, she appeared outside, watching my windows. At precisely 7:15 in the evening, I emerged, dressed exactly as the planted information suggested, got into my car and drove toward the restaurant. She followed at a careful distance, just as we had anticipated. The restaurant was real. The private room was booked, but the guests weren't my colleagues or the executives from the fictitious job offer. Waiting inside were 2 detectives from the Cybercrimes Division, my lawyer, and a court representative. I entered through the front while plainclothes security monitored all approaches to the building. She circled the block twice before parking and entering through the side door, exactly as the restaurant manager had predicted based on the layout. This entrance led past the kitchen and required using a staff keypad, which she somehow possessed the code for, another piece of evidence of her extensive preparation. The private dining room had 2 entrances, the main door from the restaurant floor and a service entrance that connected to an observation room we had set up. I sat with my back to the main door, deliberately vulnerable, working on my laptop with a glass of wine. She entered silently through the main door 15 minutes after I arrived, believing herself unobserved. The security feed showed her approach, her hesitation at the threshold, and then her decisive step forward. What happened next was recorded from 5 different angles. She approached my laptop while I appeared distracted by a phone call, a call actually connected to the detective in the observation room. When I stood and walked toward the window, still engaged in conversation, she removed a USB drive from her purse and inserted it into my computer. The cybersecurity software immediately detected the malware attempting to deploy, a sophisticated program designed to grant her complete access to my system and any networks it connected to. The program triggered a silent alarm to the observation room, At the exact moment the detectives witnessed the physical insertion of the device, I turned, ending my call, and finally acknowledged her presence. "I've been waiting for you to make that mistake," I said calmly. The confusion on her face turned to shock as the service door opened and the detectives entered. "What is this?" she demanded, quickly removing the USB drive and concealing it in her hand. "This is the end of your campaign," I replied as one detective explained she was being detained on suspicion of computer fraud, stalking, and corporate espionage. The other detective retrieved the USB drive despite her attempt to drop it beneath the table. Her composure cracked entirely. "You set me up," she hissed. "Everything we had was real until you decided to throw it away. I was just trying to make you see what you were missing." "What we had was control, not love," I responded. "And this isn't a setup, it's consequences." As they led her away, she looked back with an expression I'll never forget. Not anger or hatred, but a twisted form of satisfaction. "You finally paid attention," she said. "That's all I ever wanted." Her words sent a chill through me, because in her distorted reality, this confrontation was still a form of connection. Even in defeat, she had achieved her perverse goal, forcing me to focus entirely on her for weeks. But as the door closed behind her, I felt something shift. For the first time in 2 months, I took a breath that didn't carry the weight of being watched. The silence around me now belonged to me alone. 2 months after our breakup, I sit across from the detective handling my case. The evidence we gathered led to multiple felony charges: computer fraud, stalking, illegal surveillance, and corporate espionage. Her apartment revealed the command center of her operation, wall maps tracking my movements, detailed schedules of my activities, and sophisticated equipment that confirmed her technical capabilities weren't amateur. "She'll likely take a plea deal," the detective explains, sliding a folder across the table. "The evidence is overwhelming. Her lawyer knows it's in her best interest to avoid trial." I opened the folder to find photographs of items recovered from her residence. Beyond the surveillance equipment are disturbing artifacts of obsession: clothing items stolen from my apartment, printed screenshots of private conversations annotated with her analysis, and journals detailing elaborate fantasies about our reconciliation. "There's something else you should know," the detective says hesitantly. "We found plans for escalation. If the digital harassment didn't bring you back, she had contingencies that went far beyond what you experienced. The implications hang heavy in the air. This wasn't just about making me regret leaving her. The endgame could have been much darker." As I leave the police station, my phone buzzes with a notification. For a split second, old fears resurface before I remember it's from my new secure device. It's a message from my boss. The company has offered me a promotion and relocation package to our West Coast office, a fresh start. That evening, my remaining allies gather at my apartment for the first time. We have operated in separate cells until now, limiting information flow to protect against compromise. My cousin brings actual champagne, not the celebration we had fabricated for the sting operation. My cybersecurity friend arrives with a device that scans the apartment one final time, confirming it's clean. My boss joins briefly, bringing the formal offer letter and something unexpected, a security consultant position for my cybersecurity friend. "The way you two handled this situation impressed our executive team," he explains. "We could use that kind of thinking." As they leave, I stand in my empty apartment, packing the last of my belongings for tomorrow's move. The silence feels different now, peaceful rather than ominous. I realize I haven't checked over my shoulder or scanned for surveillance in days. The temporary restraining order has become permanent. The legal system that failed me before now has irrefutable evidence of criminal behavior. Her bail conditions include GPS monitoring and no internet access. The digital shadow she cast over my life has finally lifted. My phone rings. It's my lawyer with an update. She's accepted the plea deal. 18 months in a minimum security facility followed by 5 years of supervised release with strict technology restrictions. No contact provisions extend 10 years beyond that. The prosecutor pushed for these terms, specifically because of the evidence suggesting her plans for escalation. "There's one more thing," my lawyer says. "She's requested to send you a letter through my office. You're under no obligation to read it." I consider the offer for a moment. "No," I finally respond. There's nothing she could say that I need to hear. My refusal isn't born of anger or fear. It's the final assertion of a boundary she never respected. Her words, whether threats, apologies, or manipulations, no longer have power over me. The next morning, I load the last box into my car and take a final look at the apartment that became both prison and battleground. The new tenants arrive next week, unaware of the invisible war fought within these walls. As I drive away, my rearview mirror shows only empty road behind me. No tail, no shadow, no watcher. The regret she promised never materialized. In its place is something she didn't anticipate: freedom. The silence she monitored so obsessively is now truly mine again. And in that reclaimed silence, I find not emptiness, but possibility.